The handsome guy sitting next to Yiziyun noticed who she was looking back at time and again, and also directed a furious look at the intruder. He was probably taller than Nuli, and in his eyes, that sparkled from under his furrowed brows, there was something secretly cruel. Nuli immediately recognized him, Xinyu of the Sacred Family, one of the three main families of Lightstar, the teacher's precious nephew. In his past life, Xinyu was constantly dragging after Yiziyun. In terms of their families, they were considered the perfect couple, and word of mouth had long ago married them in absentia. If Lightstar hadn't fallen, Xinyu and Yiziyun would definitely have gotten married, but when the blizzard beasts attacked, the Sacred Family betrayed the city and fled, leading it to its fate. Such was the will of heaven, but Yiziyun did not become Xinyu's wife, but tied her fate to Nuli. The thought of this, of course, warmed his heart, and his lips spread themselves in a smile, but seeing Yiziyun next to Xinyu was so unpleasant that it made his head ache. Yiziyun liked Xinyu now, and the looks she threw at Nuli were overflowing with contempt. Probably thinks I'm ignorant and lazy, Nuli thought, but even from such looks of hers, her heart sank and it was hard to breathe. Remembering the past, Nuli decided not to hang his nose and smiled, for being able to look at Yiziyun again. Thank you, Time Demon Spirit Book. And he's weird, Yiziyun thought as she felt Nuli's gaze fixed on her. His eyes shone with joy like stars, but at the same time there was sadness in them. Had I forgotten something related to that boy? She asked herself. Why does he look at me like that? Yiziyun knew that a white-toothed smile and lips as delicate as lotus petals made her pretty. No wonder so many boys were infatuated with her. That high-born Yiziyun, daughter of the head of the city, granddaughter of Yi Mo, the legendary demon spellcaster. And she's extremely talented if she's already formed the Blue Soul Vessel at the Dantian Point. At Sacred Orchid Academy, only a few people know who Yiziyun is. If my nephew, Xinyu, manages to get her as his wife, the position of the Sacred Family will be greatly strengthened. This is why Xinyu was sent to study at the academy, and why I teach this class. Xinshui reversed her transformation from demonic form to human form and crossed her arms across her chest and looked over the rows of cadets. So, for the next 2 years, all of you are my students. I know the headmaster said at the line that the academy considers everyone equally worthy of success, but I must convey to you the harsh truth of this world: there is no equality. Xinshui's words, spoken in a harsh voice, pierced the cadets' hearts like a dagger. Freezing, they listened to the teacher in absolute silence. Demon spellcasters and warriors have 5 levels of strength: bronze, silver, gold, steel, and legendary. Each level is divided into 5 ranks. The clan that spawned a demon caster of gold level is considered noble. The one that gave the city a demon caster of steel level becomes noble. A family with 3 steel or 1 legendary demon spell skinner can become a noble. This class has members from noble and noble clans, from core families, and commoners. You all start at the bottom of the ladder, but you are all different, and I hope everyone understands that. The commoner will always remain a commoner. The status of the noble is not attainable to him. Forget silly fantasies. Even among the noble and noble clans there is a strict hierarchy, and it is absolutely impossible to rise to a higher level. In front of Xinshui, the cadets dressed in a simpler way were embarrassed and confused, while the majors from aristocratic families, on the contrary, stuck out their chests, proudly bearing their noses. Only Nali, Yi Qiyun, Lu Piao, and a few other aristocratic cadets remained unperturbed. When Lightstar was destroyed, many aristocratic families fled, and the common people fought for the city until their last breath. Of all his friends, Nali had the greatest respect for Du Jie. The arrogant contempt oozing in Xinshui's gaze filled Nali's heart with anger. When the city was threatened, the Sacred Family had fled first, so he was equally disliked by both the teacher and her nephew Xinyu. In his past life, he remembered that Nali couldn't stand Xinshui because of her always being rude. Master Xinshui, let me ask you. The question he asked sounded like a thunderbolt from out of the blue. As the other cadets listened to her monologue with silent humility, and Nali dared to interrupt him, Xinshui unhappily turned her attention to the cocky boy and found that it was the same guy who was looking at Yiziyun. After all, it was for him that all those words were spoken, and he'd think about it. He dares to open his mouth. And what don't you understand? Coldly through to the impertinent Xinshui. Master, you're saying that Svitozer is the only city that survived from the dark times, and no one but us survived. How can you prove it? Perhaps you, teacher, have traversed the mountains of the holy ancestors and visited the endless wilderness? The poison patch? Or in the swamp of the blood moon, in the bay of the spirit, seen the mountain of heavenly shine and the snowy plains of the north? In his past life, Nali had walked around all these places, so he could now look at Shinshue from the height of his experience. Heavenly Shine Mountain? The snow-covered plains? Shinshue frowned. These names were unfamiliar to her, but she had heard legends about the endless desert, poison bowl, and blood moon swamp that were somewhere very far beyond the holy ancestor mountains. She snorted dismissively, "Of course I have not been there. I've lived in Lightstar since I was born." Nali smiled and remarked, "Since you've never been anywhere but our city, how can you claim that we, its inhabitants, are the only survivors in the entire world?" Shinshue opened her mouth, but couldn't find anything to say. The cadets only whispered. They had no idea what kind of lands Nali was talking about. Yi Ziyun threw a curious look at him. How does this boy know so much? Shinyu, who was sitting next to Yi Ziyun, looked at Nali with a furrowed brow. He knew that Nali was no match for him, but he sensed the inexplicable threat he posed. Watching the teenagers whispering amongst themselves, Shinshue became terribly angry and asked sarcastically, "Surely you can prove that it's not just the inhabitants of Svitozar that have survived? Prove it?" Nali grinned. All the experience of his past life proved that people were amazingly wise by nature. They had survived the dark times, rebuilt many majestic cities. But he couldn't tell that, so Nali quietly continued, "Let me, Master Shinshue, tell you a story. One frog had been living at the bottom of a well since he was born. From there she saw a little piece of the sky and claimed that the sky was so small as the palm of her hand. But is it really so? We can only conclude that the frog is very limited in its judgment." The whole class rolled with laughter. Everyone realized that Nali was saying sensible things, and most importantly, he practically called the teacher a frog. Yeah, like a frog at the bottom of a well, that's right. The girls giggled. They couldn't stand Shinshue, and now they couldn't take their admiring eyes off of Nali. This guy is so tough that he dared to openly, in front of the class, insult the teacher. "You!" Shinshue was ready to tear up and tear down. How dare he compare her to a frog? She had never met such an insolent student before. And this Nali is quite interesting. Yi Ziyun couldn't help herself and laughed too. So much for the teacher, she didn't even have the words to say it back. A smile lit up her pretty face, and Nali winked at her and smiled back. But Yi Ziyun, noticing this, turned away sharply. Of course, the boy's bravery touched her heart, but after all, if you think about it, he was only a bully. Admired that in one fell swoop his friend had belted his teacher and practically glued the girl together, Lu Piao respectfully gave Nali a big thumbs up. "I respect that, brother. May I ask you one more question, Master Shinshue?" Nali continued. Shinshue almost burst with rage, but restrained herself, hissing through her teeth, "Well, what else have you got? You said that a commoner will always be a commoner and won't be allowed to be a noble, but didn't the legendary demon charmer Yi Mo come from the commoners?" Nali's eyes darted out, revealing an example of infant innocence. "Don't you know that?"